So I first learned of it as the Chief Yellowhead Wampum Belt, but it's also called the Council Fire Wampum Belt. So this one was really important to the community, and we chose to include it in the piece because it talks about the history and kind of the extent of the territory traditionally of the Anishinaabe people. So it talks about all the historic council fires, where they were located, and the dotems and clans that were associated with each of the council fires. So they felt this was a very important way to kind of start off introductory to the piece, because it talks about the history and about the land and about the presence of the Anishinaabe in this territory. And that was kind of important for them to kind of introduce individuals and start kind of the narrative that the piece kind of unfolds as you work through it. But all these plants were chosen because the site you were on yesterday at the Black Oak Savanna, so that site was identified by the community as incredibly important. And so I actually worked with the team that you met at the Black Oak Savanna, and we co-developed the planting plan based on the plants that exist in the Black Oak Savanna. And so all of these species exist in the Black Oak Savanna, and that's why we selected them. And actually, as we replant, as we weed and we get bare spots and we replant, we actually buy plants from the Black Oak Savanna that they've grown from seed there. So we're actually bringing plants from Alderville back to Kingston. And we think that's really important kind of conceptually in the piece, as kind of restating the territory of Alderville First Nation here by bringing a part of the land at Rice Lake back to the land here in Kingston. So we're going to walk through, and then I'm going to ask you again about the next wampum belt we encounter. And I'm hoping maybe one of you knows which one it is. There's a hint on it. This is probably one of the most important wampum belts. Even though it's not a historic wampum belt, it's a contemporary one that was gifted from the Crown. So it's the 1764 Covenant Chain Wampum Belt. So the two individuals in the middle are supposed to be the Anishinaabe and the Crown. And so this wampum belt was gifted during a gathering of 24, I don't know if they were chiefs or nations, 24 members of the Anishinaabe Nation gathered with the Crown at Niagara to commemorate this. This was done after the Royal Proclamation to recognize that event. The reason this wampum belt is important and the community wanted it is, one, it's not readily recognized by many community members, and Chief and Council felt it was very important that the community know about this wampum belt, because this wampum belt was double-edged. So what it did, what the Royal Proclamation did, is it acknowledged Indigenous peoples as human beings, before which we weren't. So we didn't have rights. We couldn't enter into legal agreements. So by recognizing us as people, it allowed us to enter into legal agreements. Why it's a double-edged sword is the first dispossession of land through treaty happened shortly after this gathering and the Royal Proclamation. Because once we were recognized as human beings and people and allowed to enter into legal agreements, we were allowed to enter into treaty, and we were allowed to sign away land rights through the treaty process. And this started the dispossessions and the appropriation of land within Canada, and the eventual taking away of the territories and the treaty processes, which we all know have never been fully upheld. So we felt that before you enter into the heart of the piece, it was important that you first encounter the history of the territory and the occupation in our relation, not our, the Anishinaabe relationships. I say our, I'm Métis, I have a relationship with a different part of Canada, but the Anishinaabe, this community's relationship with this land, and then encounter this important modern wampum belt that started the treaty process and the Crawford Purchase and the dispossession of Kingston from Alderville First Nation and the relocation of them to Grape Island, and then eventually to Rice Lake which is where the reserve is located now. The next wampum belt that the community requested and felt very strongly about is where Elder Wabigoon is standing, and this is the dish with one spoon. And so they felt it was really important to represent this one because often this one is misrepresented. So it's talked about in very general terms as a sharing of the land, of a sharing of the bounty. As we all have one bowl to eat from and we all have one spoon and we need to share. But actually, this wampum belt was gifted after what are often referred to as the Beaver Wars by the Iroquois to the Anishinaabe to recognize their rights over this territory. And that there were agreements to share the land and the resources of it, but there were protocols. That there was a recognition that this was Anishinaabe territory, and to come and to share the bounty of that land, there were protocols you had to engage on first if you were not Anishinaabe. And so they asked that this wampum belt be included so that this teaching could occur in the space by elders and community members who know that history. So as we kind of progress further in, you'll see there is this log that sits in the middle here. So we included this, one, because it actually existed here in this space. It was a tree that was deemed to be a hazard and could potentially fall down because it had significant rot and had a big hollow, natural hollow down the center. So when we took that tree down, I asked that they save a 3-meter length of it and that we would embed this centrally in the garden as a nurse log. And so, a nurse log, as it decomposes, becomes a host to specific plants and fungi that only exist on rotting wood. And so we wanted to incorporate this because we felt in the light of reconciliation and cultural rejuvenation that there was this kind of idea and there was this relationship to this idea of the decay of the log and the rebirth that comes out of that. And that Alderville itself is kind of coming through a rebirth as traditions and culture are passed on to the youth and as language is reinvigorated within the community. And so out of kind of the decay of the last 200 years, there's this optimism of a rebirth within the Indigenous community, within that community. And so we wanted to kind of reflect that in some way in the piece, and we chose the nurse log as a way to do that. And then the Black Oak Savannah team chose the black cohosh, which is this dark purple plant, as one that they really loved and felt this would be an appropriate place and relationship for that plant to exist. The design is the medicine wheel that sits in the middle of this space. And so before I talk about the design of this space, I want to zoom us out to a bird's eye, because one thing you can't see in this piece that was incorporated in is the Methodist church that exists in the Alderville community. So every time we visited Alderville, they talked about the church and the community's relationship with the church, and they brought us a couple times to the actual building that exists in the community. And a lot of the community members are still active Methodists and practice that religion. But not only did the church have its negative aspects, but there were also positive aspects that they talked to us about. So the church actually wrote a full Bible in Ojibwe in collaboration with the Alderville community, which allowed the record of their language, which is allowing them to rejuvenate their language from the recording of the language in the writing of the Bible in Ojibwe for them. And so they have, a difficult relationship with the church, but it is something that they recognize as very important, and the impact is unmistakable on what it had on the community. And so they wanted to recognize that in some way. So what we actually did is the footprint of the space you're standing in is an exact outline of the footprint of the Methodist church. So where we were standing in the dish with one spoon wampum belt is actually the entry vestibule with the large tower. And the trees that define it are actually a columnar tree that will eventually kind of define that tower structure. And then where we're standing right now is where the pews are, and then where the priest stands is up at the front, roughly where the sumac tree is. And so there was this kind of light use of that to recognize the history of that and how that has impacted kind of the contemporary culture of Alderville, and that they can't divorce the presence of the church from their identity and the culture that they are now. It has influenced it, and it has influenced much of the community, and much of the community still embraces and actively participates in the Methodist religion. But within the church, a lot of the traditions and culture were retained, and there is this kind of resilience. So even as Methodism was pushed on the community, they retained a lot of their teachings, and the medicine wheel was one that they wanted to be present in the space. So we chose to do that in the very center, creating the circle here. And then the medicine wheel was divided into segments to honor the traditional calendar and the moon cycles. So we have 13 divisions in the middle for the 13 moons of the year. We have 4 divisions for the 4 seasons, each divided into 3 for the modern months. And then the outer ring is 28 divisions for the 28-day cycle between each moon. We actually hand-selected 7 boulders from a farm field in Prince Edward County, so near Grape Island, which was one of the stops of Alderville before they ended up in Rice Lake. I went out and chose 7 boulders that spoke to me, and we placed these in the middle to honor the 7 grandfather teachings, and then did a mass planting of sweetgrass. But part of the planting strategy with the piece is that we want to respect and honor all of the plants that are here and allow them to be where they are. So things like the Rudbeckia have self-seeded themselves and are constantly moving around the garden as the garden grows and changes. And so all the Rudbeckia around the nurse log, we didn't plant any of that. That has all chosen to be there. It apparently really likes it there. And so it's readily self-seeding itself there. But, you know, in a couple of years, it may not be there anymore. It might move somewhere else. And we want to allow the plants that right to kind of propagate and seed and grow and, you know, honor those beings that exist in this garden and the benefits that they bring to us in their beauty and their medicines, but also all the benefits they offer to all our other relations, the flyers and the crawlers. And then the last plant, which I didn't mention, which is really important, is this tree sitting here, is a black oak. So we felt we couldn't do a black oak savanna planting without at least having one black oak, and we placed it in the western doorway to block that doorway. So the teachings I've received is that we enter through the east because that's where we're born and that's where we enter into the world. That's spring. The western doorway is where our spirit leaves, to the spirit world. And when we're gathering in ceremony, we don't want our spirit leaving, so we block that doorway. And that's what I was taught, and so that's why I chose to choose a black oak and place it to block that doorway, so that our spirits can't leave while we're in ceremony in the space.
So the boulder selection.
Yeah.
And you said they were on Grape Island. They were found in
Prince Edward County.
Prince Edward County. Are they glacial erratics?
They are glacial erratics. So you find them in every farm field. So what we did is we went to a farm field, and the farmer had pulled them all out to farm his fields, and they all sit. You can usually see them. You may have seen them when you're driving through the country, these big piles of boulders sitting along the edges of farm fields. So those are all the glacial erratics that were deposited here during the last ice age as the glaciers retreated. And they are in kind of every field and every part of Ontario. And the farmers pull them out as they're plowing and prepping their fields. And so we were able to go to one of the farm fields and choose these boulders. And, you know, I think these boulders have incredible stories and histories to share with us. You know, they came here from somewhere and they were transported by this ice, and they have this incredible history and lineage, but also each one is a different material and a different process of building it. And I wish I knew more about rocks. So I'm gonna kind of end it there. Then I thought what we do for the rest of the day is I brought some scissors. We have a bunch of sweetgrass that it's time to be harvested. So what I was taught and told when I planted this was that we don't harvest in the first year. We have to let it grow for a full year, and then in the second year we can harvest. So it's been here for 2 years now. This is its second full year of growth. And sweetgrass actually requires harvesting to stay healthy. If you don't harvest it, the plant will start to decline. So I would really love you guys' help today to harvest the sweetgrass, and then if we can do as much braiding as we can in the time that we have. And at the end of the day, I'll collect all your braids and the sweetgrass that we have, and I'm actually going to bring it all to Alderville and gift it to them to acknowledge the importance of this space and thank them for allowing us to explore the space today and me to share their history with you.
And one of the things is to remember is that it is Mother Earth's hair. We want to be kind and gentle in handling this. Try not to pull out the root. We save the root and just try to detach it from and leave the root behind. One of the things that you can recognize sweetgrass is by the purple at the bottom of the stem itself, and that it is ready to be picked. The sweetgrass that is sort of overlaying the sidewalk and is starting to sort of fold over each other is a sign that it wants to be picked. So mind, body, spirit represents each braid. Many different teachings on this beautiful sweetgrass, and just be mindful that think good thoughts as you pick this, and just remember that beautiful smell that brings us peace. That sweetgrass is male medicine. It sits in what direction does it sit in? North. In the north direction, right? Good. So we handle it with care and gentle as we would be with our own hair. So, good.